listeners and viewers. Welcome to Kaduna State Ministry of Education Radio and TV e-learning program designed for our SS3 and other students staying at home due to the coronavirus pandemic. The present administration, under the able leadership of His Excellency, Malam Nasir Ahmed El-Rufai, is positioned, as always, to ensure that under his leadership, our students are not left behind in all areas of human endeavors, especially education. Kaduna State is the center of learning. Therefore, we want to ensure that our students excel in their forthcoming examinations and beyond. Students and other learners at home are given this opportunity in order to continue learning, as education is a continuous process. Different subjects will be taught in this program to assist students to perform excellently in the forthcoming Senior School Certificate examination being conducted by NECO and WAEC as soon as schools reopen. Teachers making presentations will always provide their names and phone numbers during each presentation, and they can be contacted for questions, further explanations, and/or clarifications. The following numbers and contacts can also be reached for expression of any concern or observation: 090-865-00545 or 080-383-62072. Our website is www.education.kdsg.gov.ng. Our email education@kdsg.gov.ng or education.kdsg@gmail.com. Our YouTube channel, Ministry of Education, Kaduna State. Our Twitter handle @Kaduna_MOE. Or our Facebook page, Ministry of Education, Kaduna State. Stay safe, stay at home, and learn well. Thank you, happy listening, and happy viewing.
Welcome to Ministry of Education, e-learning, television. My name is Obangozi Gloria. You are welcome to another segment of home management class. And on today's topic, we are going into food preservation. Definition of food preservation, principles underlying food preservation, reasons for preserving food, meaning of food spoilage, causes of food spoilage, preparation of food for preservation, and method and ways of preserving food. Have we ever wondered why we have dry okra, dry tomatoes, canned food, bottled food in the market? It is because of what? Preservation. It has to do with what? Preservation. So we go to the definition of preservation. Food preservation is the art of keeping food for a longer period of time before it is consumed. On our last topic on food storage, we saw that food storage is the keeping of food for a short period of time before consumption or ultimate use. But preservation is far more than food storage. So in food storage, preservation, it has to take a very long period of time, and this has to do with what? Addition of other substances. Other substances will be added into the food to make it last longer. Also changing the form of the foodstuff to another food through processing, like our canned food are changed from their original state to another state for it to last longer. We also have keeping the food in specially designed containers or equipment. Containers like tinned food, like bottled food, they are kept in these specially containers, and then chemicals are added to them to make them last longer. Now, what are the principles underlying food preservation? One of the principles underlying food preservation is destruction of what? Microorganisms. Microorganisms has to be destroyed, and these microorganisms cannot be seen with the naked eyes. And this microorganism could be mold, could be yeast, and also what? Bacteria. And then prevention of their entry into the food. This is one of the what? Principles. And then arrest of the action of food enzymes to stop them from what? Entering the food and causing food spoilage. Prevention of purely chemical reactions in the food we eat. All these are what? Principles underlying food preservation, which is destruction of what? Microorganisms, prevention of their entry into the food, arrest of the action of food enzymes, and prevention of what? Purely chemical reactions in food. Now we go, what are the reasons for preserving food? Why do we preserve food? Number one is prevents food spoilage. When we preserve food, what are we trying to do? We are trying to stop spoilage. Number two, to avoid wastage, especially when there is plenty of food. When food is in season, there tends to be wastage. So the reasons for preserving food is to what? Is to stop or avoid wastage. To allow for the use of food during the off-season. That is why we have our dried okra, we have our dried tomatoes, we have our tinned tomatoes or tomato purees. Why? So that when they are off-season, we have something to make use of. To eliminate the purchase of food when they are most expensive. There was a time that a basket of tomato was 20,000, 25,000. If we have already preserved tomato, I don't think we'll waste that money in buying a basket for 20,000 naira because we'll have it readily when it is off season. And then to introduce variety in the family menu. When food are preserved, you have so many varieties in the family which can be used in the family menu, not repeating food oftentimes. And then to prolong its shelf life. Like in food storage, the shelf life is short. But in food preservation, it can be what? It can last up to a year or 2 years because it has been what? Chemicals have been added to it to help to keep the shelf life. To be able to care for emergency situation. Look at the condition we are today all over the world. If we don't have food preserved and kept in the home, I mean we are going to run into what? Problem. Because there will not be food readily available in the home. But because we have food which is preserved, and that is why we are falling back on the food that we have preserved, and we are what? Making use of them now when there is what? Lockdown all over. Meaning of food spoilage. Now, what is food spoilage? Food spoilage is undesirable changes taking place in the food as a result of the presence or action of microorganisms, which eventually leads to its rejection. When food is kept without preserving it, there will be what? Undesirable changes, which will render that food unfit for human consumption, which will make that food what? To spoil. And that is what? The meaning of what? Food spoilage. Now, what are the causes of food spoilage? Number one, action of microorganisms. As I've said earlier on, that these microorganisms cannot be seen with the naked eye. We have bacteria, we have mold, and we have yeast. These also tend to what? To spoil food easily. And then we have action of what? Enzymes present in the food we eat. This is also what? One of the factors that causes food to what? To spoil. Purely chemical actions in the food we keep also causes what? The food to spoil. Action of insects and rodents. Insects like housefly, like cockroaches, they also help food what? To spoil easily. Rodents like rats and mice also tends to spoil food. Then the action of food. This is also one of the reasons why food spoil. Heat causes food to what? To spoil. Action of dust, particles. And this dust particles goes along with what? So many things that we cannot see with the eyes, which also causes the food to spoil. Now, before we go into preserving food, there are certain things we must do before we preserve the food. We will not just start and then we'll start immediately to preserve food. There are certain actions, certain things we must do to the food before they are preserved. Number one, ensure that the food are of good quality. For example, wholesomeness of the food. I cannot bring something that is spoiled and want to preserve it. I will not get a good result. Wholesomeness means that it has to be whole. It has to be good in entirety. It has to be good before it is what? Preserved. Number two, we have to clean the food thoroughly. If I am preserving tomato, I'll have to start with washing before what? Preserving. You cut it into the desired shape, depending on the type of food you want to preserve. If it is yam, if it is fish, it has to be what? Washed, peeled, cut in different sizes so that it will what? It will be preserved very well. Then you package properly and label if need be. This is mainly for freezing and chilling. In our freezers, you see some freezers being what? Filled with so many foods in leather. They are not labeled. So food must be labeled properly before they are what? Before they are preserved. Make sure that the equipment for preserving the food, for example, your freezer, your refrigerator is what? Is clean before the food is preserved. Now we have methods of preserving food. What are the methods of preserving food? Number one is drying stroke dehydration. What is drying? What is dehydration? Dehydration is the removal of moisture content from food. When water, moisture is removed from food, that food is said to be what? To be dried. So number one is what? Drying and dehydration, which we have said that it is the what? The removal of moisture content. When the moisture content of food is reduced, it is said to be what? Dried. And under this drying, we have different types of drying. Number one is solar drying. Now, solar drying, it is different from ordinary drying in the sense that solar drying is different from sun drying. It is by the use of equipment, as we can see in the picture. The use of an equipment to collect the sun's radiation, to attract the sun's radiation towards the food, and then the food is dried. But common drying, where you don't use what? The solar, which is just the sun, the food are what? Spread on a mat under the sun to dry. The food is what? Being turned from time to time so that the other part that is not dry will also be dried. But in solar drying, it has to be with what? The equipment to attract the sun's radiation. And examples of food that will be dried in this method, using this method, is cassava, maize, melon, and so on. Then we go to the next one, which is oven drying. Most of us have oven at home where you cannot dry your food in the sun. The oven is what? Is preheated. Preheated. And then the food is what? Is arranged. As we can see in the picture here, that the food is what? Is arranged in sections. And then the oven preheated. And the food what? Being dried. And examples of the food that are dried using this method is what? There's the fish, the meat, coconut, and so on, using oven drying. Number two, we have freeze drying. Heat is supplied by conduction or radiation, as we can see with the pipes through which the what? The heat passes through. Freeze. The water is being what? Taken out from the food through what? Conduction and radiation, using a special equipment. And then the food is being dried. Examples are meat, fish, and vegetable. We go to the next one, which is roller drying. The foods are arranged in a roller plate or rotating roller, and then as the food is rolling, the heat on the roller blades does what? Dries the food from the picture. As it goes down, the food is what? Is being dried using this method. As the food is rolling, the food is what? Is being dried. Examples are potato flakes, cocoa, oats, and yam flakes are what? Dried using this roller drying. Now, number E, we have vacuum drying. As we can see, food is being fed through the tunnel and then it's passed through. Water is removed by the creation of vacuum. Heat is supplied by conduction or radiation. That is under vacuum. The food is what? Is arranged and then passed through a vacuum. And that vacuum is heat and then what? Hot air, which dries the food. Now, tunnel drying is the one in the picture here. In tunnel drying, the food is fed and then it's passed through a long tunnel. On that long tunnel, it is what? It is what? Heated up. Warm air, that is, the food is placed on a perforated trays and passed through a warm air tunnel. Examples are what? Vegetables and fruits could be dried using this method. Then we go to the next one, which is what? Spray drying. Now, this food is what? In liquid form and passed through a nozzle. As we can see, this is the nozzle and this is the drying chamber. As the food is passed through the nozzle in droplets, the air dries the food immediately and then it goes down as dried food. And how are these food dried? The food to be dried is usually in liquid form. The liquid is passed through a small nozzle, as I've said earlier on, and in form of a spray into a hot chamber. Examples of food to be dried in this method is milk, egg whites, and other cocoa beverages to collect them. Then the next one is what? Low temperature. Now, we are done with the drying. Don't forget that we said that drying is the removal of moisture content. And then we have different types of drying, which is the solar drying, the tunnel drying, the vacuum drying, the freeze drying, the spray drying, and then the roller drying. That is under number 1 types of drying. Then we come to number 2, which is low temperature. When we talk of low temperature, this is keeping our food in low temperature below 0 degrees centigrade or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And this can take either 2 forms, which is chilling and freezing. From the picture, we can see a refrigerator on our right, left. On our right, we can see the freezer. The refrigerator is where you chill your food. Where you chill your food, and the freezer is where food is stored under 0 degrees centigrade, keeping them in ice block, and this will take a longer period of time before they are what? Spoiled. Food which is usually kept in this method lasts longer as long as there is what? Power supply. Then we go to application of high temperature. This is the use of what? Heat. Destruction of food enzymes by heating. And this method can be done in 2 ways. Number A is what? Pasteurization, and B is sterilization. What do we mean by pasteurization? Pasteurization is the use of heat below 100 degrees centigrade to what? To preserve food. While sterilization is the use of high temperature above 100 degrees centigrade to what? To preserve food. For example, if I want to sterilize my tomato, I want to preserve my tomato at home, how do I go about it? Using sterilization method. I go to the market, I get my basket of tomatoes, I come home, I wash it, I take it to the mill where it is grinded, it is brought home, I'll boil it. After boiling it to reduce the temperature, to reduce the liquid content, I pour it still in a sieve to drain the water. And then I get my bottles. These bottles, you can use Bama bottles or those that have what? Metal cover. When I get it, I pour the tomato in the bottle, I cork it, cover it, then I put it in a pot, and then I boil it as we can see in this picture. Then you boil it for over 100 degrees centigrade, and then it is what? Done. I can leave it, it will last for a year or a year and a half, so that when fresh tomato is off season, I can readily fall back at my tomato puree, which is done by sterilization method. Then we have chemical preservation. This is the addition of chemicals to preserve food. Addition of chemicals to food to preserve them, to keep them, to make them last longer. And there are 3 types of chemicals used in preserving food. A is natural chemicals. What are these natural chemicals? These are natural occurring. They have not been tampered with. They are in their natural state. Examples are salt, we have sugar, we have vinegar, we have phenols and aldehydes. And these phenols and aldehydes are from smoke, which helps in preserving food. Then the synthetic chemicals are those ones that are manufactured in the factories. They are used or added to food to preserve them. Examples are nitrites, benzoic acid, butylated hydroxyl, toluene, which is BHT. These are added to food to preserve them. You see at times when bananas are gotten, they are not ripe, these chemicals might be added to them. To what? To keep them not too ripe. To make them what? Not too ripe. And then with the last one, we have what? Antibiotics. These antibiotics are also added to food to help in preserving them. Example is what? Tetracycline. They are added to food to preserve them. Then number 4 is the use of irradiation. These are powerful radioactive elements that are capable of destroying microorganisms. Example is cobalt. Have we ever wondered the apple we buy from the market could last as long as 2 to 3 years? Why? They have passed through this process. As we can see, this is an apple. Through this use of irradiation. And also our tubers are also preserved in this method. Then we have canning and bottling. This is the process of keeping the food aseptically, using chemicals to what? To make the what? The containers and the things to be what? Germ-free. Keeping them free from what? Germs. So in cans and bottles, examples are what? Fruit juice and tomato puree. As we can see from my left and my right, the canned food, they pass through also what? Heating. But some chemicals are used in the can to keep them what? Free from germs. Likewise, the bottled food. Likewise, our bottled drinks, carbons are being what? Used in them to also help in preserving them. Then the second to the last is what? Fermentation. This is a very old method of preserving food. It involves the decomposition of some of the food components to produce acid. And that acid that is produced makes the food to be what? Unfavorable to what? Microorganisms. Microorganisms could not thrive in that area, in that food, because of the presence of what? Acid. Examples are locust beans. And these locust beans, Iru is in Yoruba, Ogiri. In Igbo, Dawadawa, in what? In Yoruba. All these are what? Are fermented foods. And then we have wine and burukutu, which is what? A local alcohol. It's also what? Preserved in this manner. Now, number 8, we have smoking. This method is similar to drying. The fish or meat is first washed and cut into sizes and then placed on wire gauze, placed over a fire or heated charcoal. The heat generated penetrates the fish or meat and causes dehydration. As we can see the meat that is arranged on the wire gauze, and we can see the smoke. This smoke also comes to, as I told us initially, contains phenols and what? Aldehydes, which helps the food what? To get dried and also preserve. It gives it a special color and also patina, P-A-T-I-N-A, which helps the food to be preserved. We have learned on our last lesson what food storage is. Now, food storage is the keeping of food items for a short period of time before ultimate use, while food preservation is the act of keeping food for a longer period of time before ultimate use. For a longer period of time before ultimate use, we say some chemicals might be added to them. Their forms could be changed, which is processing, and then also they could also be kept in specially designed equipment or containers. Now, we have pasteurization. What is pasteurization and sterilization? Pasteurization is the use of heat to kill only the pathogenic substance. What do I mean by pathogenic? Pathogenic means what? Harmful substances that goes along with food. So pasteurization is the use of heat to kill only the pathogenic substances in the food, while sterilization is the use of high temperature to kill all the microorganisms which goes along with food. And that is why I said in the production of preservation of tomatoes at home, using sterilization method, that you have to boil, you have to wash your tomato, you have to boil them, you have to reduce the moisture content through passing it through a sieve, and then you put it in a container that is bottled with a metal cover, and then putting it in the pot and boil it over and over again like 1 to 2 hours to keep it what? Free from germs. We have come to the end of today's lesson. And I hope that we have learned a lot from this lesson. I have an assignment for you. Number 1, give step-by-step method of how fresh tomatoes can be preserved at home using sterilization method. I take it again. Give step-by-step method of how fresh tomatoes can be preserved at home using sterilization method. That I have told you, I have explained how we can preserve our fresh tomatoes at home using sterilization method. So I want you to give me step-by-step method on how you can preserve your tomatoes at home so that you can have them readily available when they are off season. Number 2 question, mention 4 types of drying in preservation of food. Yes, under dehydration, I gave you about 6 or 7 types of what? Drying. I just want you to give me 4 types of drying and then explain them. Then, we have come to the end of the lesson. I remain yours, Obangozi Gloria. You can reach me on this number if you have any question or observation or contribution. 0806 594 5214. I take that again. Obangozi Gloria, 0806 594 5214. Stay home, stay safe, and keep learning. God bless you all.